So, how many of you have friends? How many of you have family? How many of you have jobs? I've got really important stuff to tell you today, so I'm just going to jump right in. First of all, everyone has to give feedback sometimes. Second,
Excuse me, what are you doing? This isn't what we talked about. The Prezi is a different color than I made it, and you're just staring down at your paper. You really should look up at us.
but I worked really hard on this.
It's not going very well for you.
Okay. So what happened here? Okay, got some feedback, right? Was this positive feedback, negative feedback? Negative. Why was it negative? How do you feel about somebody jumping up in the middle of a presentation? Not okay, right? She was planted. It's okay. Well, I am Sarah Slachter, and I've been working at GRCC for a little over 3 years now. I have an undergraduate degree, and I'm working on my master's in English. And I want to be an English teacher, so feedback is a big part of that. And then I'll let Stuart introduce himself.
Hi, my name is Stuart Noorman. I was a student here at GRCC for about 3 years. I've worked in the English lab now for over 2 years, and I'm currently studying echocardiography at Grand Valley State University. So there's a lot of feedback that comes entailed with what I'm studying too, and with what I'm going into. So you may ask yourselves, who are these people and what are they doing up here talking to us? Well, like we said, this is Sarah and I'm Stuart, and we're both professional tutors here at the lab. We feel we have some credibility on the subject based on a few things. One of those being is our education. A lot of us have gone through higher levels of English courses here. Some of us have higher degrees in English, and we also have, we did some training that we've gone through that has made most of us now internationally certified as tutors. We do a lot of stuff in the lab with training. We have training modules that we do like every month. We have a certain amount of training that we have to go through. And we also do things online and things to learn how to be better tutors and give feedback and stuff like that. Experience plays a big part in this. We've done conferences, definitely work alongside the English teachers here at GRCC. One of the big things I think is us working in the writing lab, like I said, for over 2 years now. I've worked up there, Sarah's worked there for I believe 3 now. So there's a lot of experience that comes with learning how to give feedback to students. And also as students ourselves, we've gone through classes just like you have gone through. We've had to do the whole peer feedback and revision type of stage of the writing process. So we just thought that we have a lot of experience that we can base ourselves on, so we'd like to share some of that with you today. First, I'm going to kind of share with you how we do things up in the writing lab. This is how we kind of do things as tutors, but I think a lot of it you could also use yourselves while you're giving feedback to other students, especially in class when you have to do the whole peer feedback and revision type of thing. So when the session starts, we like to get to know you a little bit. Ask you your name, tell you our name, ask you how your day's going, how things been going for you in classes and stuff. Just try to set a friendly atmosphere. Next, we like to try to get to know your paper. Ask you questions like, why did you choose this topic? What do you know about it? Why are you writing this? And then we also like to ask permission. Is it okay if I look at your paper? Is it okay if I start giving you some, telling you what I think about it? We don't want to just jump right in and take control of your paper. And another thing you might want to think about is location when giving feedback. As tutors, we do it up in the writing lab. It's a designated space for that. But if you're working with someone else, a big noisy place probably isn't the best place to do it. Try to find a nice location where you can, have one-on-one conversation with them without a whole bunch of background noise and interferences coming into play. So during the tutor session, after we get to know you a little bit, and sit you down and get you comfortable, we like to use a skill that is called active listening. Active listening is basically a skill where we use observations, non-aggressive statements, and probing questions to try to figure out what you're writing about and how to make it a little better. This also employs 3 positive feedback tools: I notice, I think, and I wonder. So the first positive feedback tool is I notice. You can, use questions like, I noticed you talk a lot about this in your paper. Could you talk a little bit more? Or, I noticed this part had a lot of good description. So there's a lot of positive feedback there. It's not like you just have to tear the paper apart. You can also give good positive feedback like, I like this part. You know, I noticed this part was well written. That also helps boost their confidence and, you know, sets them a little more at ease. I think this is how we use non-aggressive statements. You know, you want to kind of put the blame on yourself, not on the other person. You don't want to make them feel aggressive or turn them off to what's going on in the session. So you could say things like, I think this part left me a little confused. Could you explain it a little better to me? You know, this just helps them think things through a little bit, and, you know, it's not really accusing them of anything. You know, you could say things like, I think you're trying to say this. Am I right? You know, so that if you're confused on ways, you know, that's another way of asking them how to explain something better instead of just saying, this part's really confused and I don't like it, because that would be negative feedback and that's going to turn the whole session sour right there. I wonder. This is how we use probing questions. You could ask questions that invite the writer to continue their thoughts to expand on their writing process. So you could ask questions like, I wonder, how does this part relate to your thesis? Or how does this relate to your topic sentence? You can also ask questions like, I wonder what happens after this? You know, what happens after you got home after being caught sneaking out? You know, so I wonder just invites them to explore their own thoughts and to expand on them. Next, Sarah's going to give you 4 other tips that we like to employ.
Thanks. How many of you have used those 3 prompts in your English classes? Have any of you used those before? I notice, I think, I wonder. Some of the staff here does employ that, so we thought it was a good model to continue. Come on in. So to start with 4 specific tips, the first is to think globally, not locally. What do you think of when you hear the word think globally? Any ideas? Big, broad, outside box. That's really good. Thank you. When we look at a tutoring session, our primary concern, first off, is a global picture of your paper. What that means is we think big picture on your paper. So you may have some sentence level revision issues, but we're going to deal with the big picture stuff like, is your organization making sense? Do you have an intro, body, conclusion? Is there a thesis? Do you know what your thesis is? These are all big questions that affect the local issues, the small issues. So if we spend a bunch of time on the local small stuff, and then you have to go and change the big stuff, you've basically put a lot of effort into stuff that's not going to be there anyway. So when you're thinking about this applying to real life, sometimes we get into situations where we're really worked up about something and we're reacting in situations, but maybe that's because we got a ticket on the way to school today. Or maybe you had a really tense fight with your boyfriend yesterday. So if we wanted to step back and think globally, okay, my emotions, my reactions right now really don't have anything to do with the situation I'm at in the lab or in class or this current conversation. So thinking globally helps us to keep a right perspective on things. Second, be specific and clear. What do you think? Why do you think that's helpful? Any ideas? Laura? Yeah, like she said, it helps you understand what the person's getting at. So if I say this paragraph's choppy, okay, but what does that mean? What does it mean to have a choppy paragraph? Where is it choppy? How do you know it's choppy? Can you give me an example? And then use leading questions. How many of you have ever heard of a guy named Socrates? Some of you heard of him? He came up with this thing called the Socratic method. It's basically the idea of using leading questions to help the learner come up with their own answers. It actually helps you as a learner if you use the questioning method. So when you're in a tutoring session with one of us, we're going to ask you questions like, oh, where is your thesis? What about this. What happened after you went up to Mackinac? How long was it? I don't really sense that it was a very long trip. How can we make that better? How can we make that come across? So using those leading questions gives the student the opportunity to come up with answers for themselves instead of us just giving you formulaic answers or what our opinions are, because it's your paper, it's your experience. While we can help you if you're really, really stuck, it's best if that's something you can come up with yourself. And in our real life relationships, I think this is really applicable. One of my peers told me about this experience she had the other day where she went to a conference for her middle school daughter, and she was thinking about this use leading questions topic because she is with us on this project. And she's like, well, I should try this out instead of just grounding her and sending her to her room for getting a really bad grade on a quiz. So instead of just accusing, she asked her questions, she asked what happened, and she found out that her instructor had written some really confusing questions, and she struggled with it, even though she had spent a lot of time studying and preparing. So that was one method that the using questions was a really good method. And then use positive feedback. Nobody wants to be torn down for something that they've put time into, thought, effort. We really don't like to get yelled at in general, maybe unless you're in the Navy or something, but I can't speak for them because I'm not one. But positive feedback, you're going to get the best results from. If you point out positive things in an essay, oh, I really like this part of your paper. I think you've done a good job of making this memorable. That is going to stay with the student who you're working with. And we have somebody very familiar to give us a negative example of feedback. Any of you seen this guy before? Go ahead and play.
What that reminded me of when I was sitting here was like, instead of being on the stage of American Idol, you're at a local rodeo, you've just been crowned the prom queen. It's the #1 show in America, biggest talent show ever, and I would give that performance 3 out of 10. It was just nothing. I actually said to Paula when the song finished, what the hell are you supposed to say constructively after a performance like that? Whoopee! No, if the judging criteria or the voting criteria here was to vote people through for managing to sing every note out of tune, you would win tonight. That is how bad it was. I'm sorry, it was absolutely excruciating from start, middle, and finish. I think it's lucky we didn't charge the audience to come in tonight because they'd asked for a refund. Well, the good news is you made your brother sound good. Good singer, cheap performance. Huh? Cheap? Yeah.
We would totally disagree.
Not good enough for this competition.
Oh, man.
I just don't think you're very good. Oh, no, I don't. For me, you are just a good singer, but forgettable.
Oh.
If ever we do American Idol as an ice dancing musical, you would be perfect. That isn't being rude, but it was verging on a desperate performance. Your facial expressions were ugly, your performance is all...
I wouldn't go as far as saying ugly. You may put it over the top, but you don't have to say ugly, okay?
Yeah, come on. She was better.
She's a beautiful girl.
As I was saying, that you are a beautiful girl, but you're ugly when you perform. That's
Oh, my God.
I don't think you have the charisma to be a star.
Oh.
Come on.
You won't?
I don't think there is any chance of you making it through to the final 12 after that performance. What we hear in the studio, because it's loud in here, I promise you, you're going to watch this back. It was a complete and utter mess. You looked... I don't think that you did yourself any favours tonight, and I don't think the public are going to like that very much, and I think that you may have blown a great opportunity that by doing something silly rather than good. may have just blown a massive opportunity by being forgettable. Sorry, Stevie, it was terrible. I mean, everything. There's no point booing, it was terrible. You were out of tune, you look really nervous, out of your depth. There is zero chance of you making it through to the next round, I'm afraid, after that. The singing was just atrocious, to be honest with you. You get one massive opportunity, which you've got tonight, you just throw it away. The simple truth is, your voice is not good enough for that song. So it just destroyed you, in my opinion, because it was such a pointless performance, to be honest with you, Stephen. The whole thing was just atrocious. I thought it was terrible. It was very generic. Well, we had fun watching you, just not listening to you, because it was absolutely terrible in most parts. I mean, it was like being at a funeral the first half, you know? Some people will probably quite like that, the minority. The majority, probably like me, thought it was verging on excruciating.
Okay. So what was not helpful about his feedback? Tori? Everything. Yeah, good. Any other thoughts? All right. So after the tutoring session, or after you get feedback from somebody on a personal level, after you hear information, whether or not it's negative or in attack mode, there's always that part of us that just wants to react. We have that emotional reaction to getting feedback. And they say like that happens within the first 30 seconds. So those first 30 seconds you can do a lot with. You can have a positive reaction or you can have a negative reaction. And you, as the one getting the feedback, have to decide how you're going to take it. So we want to give some tips on how to get feedback. The first is remain calm. It's okay to just say, thank you. I will look at that. If somebody gives you some verbal feedback on you personally, okay, I will think about this and I will get back and I'll talk to you later and we'll have a conversation about this. So remaining calm is a big step if you're getting feedback that you don't like. If you're getting feedback you like, hey, that's awesome, right? Second, ask questions. Not everybody knows how to give feedback, and they're going to give you general answers. The paper is good. Okay, well, what do I do with that? How many of you have gotten the it's good type of feedback? And you're like, okay, what do I do with that? So first thing, you can ask a pointed question and say, so what was memorable about my paper? What stood out to you? What was the best thing you liked? So you can ask a direct question for the positive. And to get constructive help, you can ask, which part was most forgettable? What could go away? Or what part needs to be improved so that it isn't forgettable? Then as far as if you're having a hard time with the feedback, it's okay if you're in the lab, it's okay. I need to take a break. I need to go out down to the drinking fountain, get a drink, and come back. It's okay, walk away. Just give yourself a little bit of time and then come back and digest what you're receiving. You can do that too in a peer session. I mean, no one's going to fault you for just needing to step away for a second. And then finally, embrace feedback. If somebody's pointing something out to you, there's a good chance that they're seeing it in a different way than you are. So whether or not you take that feedback now or you look at it later and evaluate the feedback and incorporate it, you can do that later. Or if you decide later that it's not going to work, it doesn't really fit what you want, then you can just disregard it. It's your paper. You can do the same thing. It's your life. So the feedback that you get, you choose what to take and what to pass. So now, Do I have anybody in here that likes to act or likes to like interact up front in front of people? Laura, I knew you'd raise your hand. Come on up, Laura. Come on up. Do we have any guys that might want to come up and do a little skit? It's written for you, so it's just reading. All right, you can come up. All right.
This isn't awkward at all.
Not at all.
You love me.
So just pass the mic back and forth.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to give him a quick little... Okay, so you're the one that has the All right. Your demeanor is sort of, oh, my paper's good, whatever, and you're wanting to give helpful feedback. Okay? So whenever it has the student one reads aloud, whenever the student reads aloud, I'll just say that. I'll be the interrupter there. Okay?
Oh.
All right. So let's give it up for Tori and Laura here. They're gonna
All right, I know. All right. All right. So, do you want to start?
Hey, yes. Thank you. Yeah, I think my paper is pretty good. It shouldn't take long.
Okay, cool. But before I read it, can you tell me a little bit what it's about?
It's about a trip my boyfriend and I took to Mackinac
Oh, nice. Why'd you write about that?
because it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm sure that was a fun trip. Okay, now let's get started. The teacher said we can do it by reading one paragraph at a time. So how about I read the first paragraph out loud and you listen in case anything sounds funny, then we can talk about it.
Sure, sounds fine. I heard a few things that didn't seem to go together smoothly.
Okay, well, when I read this, I noticed that you used a lot of descriptions about the things that you saw. I also noticed that there were a few times when you described certain things, but then jumped back into the story and it made me feel confused.
Well, I was trying to make you feel like you were there. I thought the descriptions were cool.
They were helpful so I could understand what you saw, but they seemed to start like little mini stories inside your bigger story.
They do that in the movie and it works.
You're right, but in writing, I think it can be confusing. Now let's read another paragraph.
This part makes me think of your trip was really short. I wonder what happened. What would happen if you'd used some words to describe how long the trip was?
What do you mean?
Like when you described the car ride, you said it was long and you made you feel tired. What else could you say that describes time?
It's you. You're a student too, sweetie.
I'm blonde. Like the ride was so long, my legs started falling asleep.
Yeah, something like that helps me understand how long it really was.
Okay, I see what you mean. Thanks.
Sure, now let's read mine.
You can give my hand. Thank you.
I have issues, man.
Thank you. Okay, so they gave us a demonstration of a realistic peer feedback situation, and I thought it went pretty well, positive feedback. So what did you notice about their observations? You can use the I notice, I think, I wonder framework to kind of help guide you. How did they approach the session? What are they talking about? Good. So they did that before setup, where they introduced their paper, got to know each other, got to know the situation a little bit. Anything else that you noticed? Were there questions or anything like that? Yes, I see some nodding of heads. Any examples you can remember? Yes. What kind of examples? Yes, back here. good. So employed the correct type of tone, the positive dimension. Okay, any other comments, Green? Good cue. It was a good cue, using their models. Any other thoughts or comments on that? Okay. I will hand this over to Stuart now.
All right, so using feedback doesn't just apply to in the classroom setting and, writing papers, talking to each other, giving each other feedback on what we have written. Using feedback applies to real-world situations. I think one of the biggest places that this really applies is in the workforce. As employees, we get feedback all the time. As employers, they give it all the time. So we have to know how to take that feedback, but we also have to know how to give feedback to our coworkers and everything like that. Workers in the service industry are constantly getting feedback, whether it be on their job performance or how they interact with customers. One of the biggest feedbacks that they have to deal with is the customer is always right. That is like the #1 rule in customer service. So they always have to be able to take feedback from a customer and just put on a smile and be able to do what the customer asks and maybe make changes next time to avoid that happening again. Career-bound workers face a lot of feedback too. How they get feedback from their superiors can really affect their job performance, which could even lead to raises. Another big part in the career force nowadays is group projects. I know we all hate those doing these here at school. I know I'm not a big fan of group projects myself, but they do exist in the real world. And so feedback's a big part of that. If you're giving negative feedback or getting negative feedback, it's just going to create a bad atmosphere within the group, and things aren't going to go too well. So you have to be able to not only give feedback, but you have to be able to digest feedback that's given to you. Educators rely heavily on feedback from their peers, but also from their students. They rely on this to help improve their jobs and to make the experience better for you as students yourselves. As a tutor here at GRCC, I rely on a lot of feedback from my fellow tutors, but also from the students that I give tutoring to. We have some processes sometimes throughout the year where we have sheets for students to fill out to give us direct feedback of how that session went. And that way I can see what areas I wasn't very strong in and maybe hopefully improve it for next time. Feedback also applies to manual and skilled labor. I know before I came to college, I was a carpenter and a business owner, and I relied on feedback quite heavily, not only from my business partner, from my employees, but also, more importantly, from my customers. Their feedback was essential to how I would maybe do the next job, or how I would advertise, or how we could set things up and do a better job. So feedback is really important into the business world. But feedback also goes into relationships.
Okay, so like the question we asked earlier, how many of you have friends? How many of you have family? Okay, so this applies to you. Like any other part of our lives, feedback goes into relationships. So it's a cycle. Sometimes you give feedback, and sometimes you take feedback. So for example, let's say somebody criticizes you for how you said something, then you in turn have to digest that information and choose how you're going to respond to it. So we use it every day in that. We also have some real life examples of quotes from other people who are people who use feedback in the workplace. So our first one here comes from a studio associate or photographer. My main job is to tell them they look good in pictures, or their kids, and then tell them that yes, all of these shots are great and you need them. Basically, I have to say, your eyes are good here, or I don't like the way your shirt lays in this one, etc. Simple as that. Another one, a full-time mom. This one's funny. I give positive feedback to my son as he figures out how to interact with people and surroundings. Also to my friends and family who hold or care for him. Mostly just make sure you keep that burp rag in the gravitational projectile path below his mouth. A marriage and family therapist. Literally, my whole job is giving feedback. I listen to client stories, complaints, experiences to partner with them in the development of workable solutions for their difficulties. I bring an objective, clinically trained perspective to their experiences and reflect my impressions to them based on empirically validated research so they can make more deeply informed decisions about how they want to proceed in the future. If you notice, the vocabulary was a little different in those two, but we're all using feedback. A restaurant server. I explain what various entrees are, and I give recommendations to people based on their preferences. A quality improvement specialist. I give feedback every day to child care providers about what the quality of their program is and how they can improve quality. I also give provider feedback to parents looking for child care. A dental hygienist. I give feedback to my fellow employees and my patients every day. Feedback is typically verbal and occasionally written. Feedback is always given in a manner that emphasizes the benefit to that person. And in true accountant form, short and simple. I give feedback through reports, email, and verbally. Less concise words. So this all ties back in to how it applies to all of life. We want to leave you with a quote on feedback. So, I have yet to find the man, however exalted his station, who did not do better work and put forth greater effort under a spirit of approval than under a spirit of criticism. What do you think that quote means? Does anybody catch it, other than the typo that I have? Yes, Laura. Yes, people do better when they get positive reinforcement than negative. That's what she said. Good. Anything else that someone saw in this? Okay, well, we thank you for coming out. Oh, did you want to add something? Go for it.
So I just wanted to recap the 4 tips that you were given along with the 3 tools that we have to use those with. So be specific and clear. You know, make sure that you're pointing out specific examples. You know, I noticed sentence number 2 and paragraph number 3 doesn't seem to fit. Being specific and clear can really help someone make good corrections. The tool you can use with that one is I notice. You know, I notice this sentence doesn't fit here. Another tip, think globally, not locally. You know, a well-written paper is, you know, if you fix all the grammar and punctuation in it, it's not going to help a paper that doesn't make a lot of sense. So think about the big picture. Make sure things are flowing together, you know, that everything in that paper makes sense and fits. You can use the tool I think there. You know, I think this paragraph would look better after this paragraph. Use leading questions. You know, make sure that you're using the Socratic method. You're asking questions that are going to help them think about their own writing, that will help them expand their own thoughts and ideas. The tool you want to use there is I wonder. You know, I wonder, you know, what happens here. And then finally, make sure you're using positive, constructive feedback. As we have stated numerously throughout this, negative feedback is not very helpful, and it, you know, just can end up hurting people's feelings and turning them off from the whole session. Any questions? Yes.
What is your biggest challenge when you are giving feedback to peers, friends, family, or students?
I think one of the biggest challenges is definitely trying to stay positive and stuff. It is so easy to just come up with something quick. Oh, that blows. I didn't like that. You know. So I think it's really hard to actually try to come up with saying things in a way that are constructive, that the student or the peer can use, that will actually help their paper.
I think part of it, too, is it's something we're not used to. I don't think we're used to trying to frame things in a positive way. So it's just learning to use I statements instead of you statements. I think that's a big part of it. I noticed this. I feel this way. I was hurt when you said this. So if you're focusing on yourself, then it's a lot less aggressive of a statement. Any other questions about feedback or anything in general with the presentation? You want to give us any feedback about our presentation? Green wants the Prezi Pink. I know. I typed that this morning. I missed that. I know. Any other questions or feedback? Okay.